Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that the Madonna World Cup halftime show will be part of a massive prophetic sign from God that is predicting, it is a prophecy, that Argentina will win the World Cup. Famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon will fall and injure his head on July 26th. Barack Obama will be the American dictator in 2029. And Pope Francis will be resurrected from the dead through demonic power on May 2nd, 2029. Also, I've added some text, superimposed some text over this video here. There will also be a massive Mary apparition, a demon pretending to be Mary, on March 22nd, 2029. And that's very relevant, as you will see, to this particular video. I forgot to put it into the title when I wrote the email, but this will also be explained in this video. The timestamp, or rather the post date of this video, proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as does this timestamped email. All right, we can see here July 15th. That is well ahead of the World Cup on the 19th, and also Paul Simon's predicted fall and injury of his head on July 26th. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward this to you. That said, it has been known for a long time, since the beginning of the World Cup, that Argentina will win this World Cup. Right? We are already past the semifinals, and Argentina beat England yesterday on the 15th. This email, by the way, was composed prior to that game. But nonetheless, I've made videos prior to this one predicting Argentina will win the World Cup. But it doesn't really matter, because had I even predicted Argentina winning the World Cup from the very onset of the World Cup, it would, of course, not be enough to convince the agnostic atheist that this is a prediction from God. I appreciate that. However, besides the precise predictions that are also contained in this video and email thread, including Paul Simon's fall and injury of his head on July 26th. I mean, obviously there will be no way to dispute what I am saying as to how I know this is going to happen, which is through the righteous Christian God of the Bible. But that said, the reasons for how I know that Argentina will win, that will be explained in this video, are clearly from God. No human being is creative enough to concoct these reasons in their own imagination, as you will see. And that is the proof that this prediction for Argentina winning is from God. You have to be a complete fool to not recognize this. So stay tuned. This video will be extremely interesting, and of course, as always, it is extremely important. God is not providing these predictions for you to go, oh, cool, neat. You were able to know this ahead of time. Absolutely not. God is telling many, many important stories through the interconnected web of God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And it is through these stories that God is able to communicate extremely important information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. This is the reason for these predictions. It is to prove the things that I'll be saying. And specifically, the controversial things that I'll be saying. And when the predictions come to pass, there will be no debate, zero discussion at all regarding these controversial things. The purpose of the predictions is to prove the matter. This is why, for example, 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy. God did this in order to prove it. It is how I learned that the Bible is the inspired Word of God. Prior to learning about Bible prophecy, the last thing I thought would have been true is the Christian worldview. That was in my early 20s. Because like most Westerners today, I would have thought, without really thinking too much, but I thought way more than the average person about this sort of subject, and was involved in Eastern religion, like, for example, a meditation group. But I would have been like most Westerners today, because only about 13% of those polled say they are atheist. If you ask people whether or not they believe in a God, most people will say yes, but not like the God of the Bible. These predictions prove that the true God is the God of the Bible. That's the purpose. If you will, the primary purpose of the predictions, of course. But that said, there is already an overwhelming amount of evidence for the righteous Christian God of the Bible. These predictions are not necessary for that. Like I said, the predictions are to prove the things that I'll be saying in the video, which God has communicated to be true through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, and which will be proven to be true when these predictions come to pass. And so let's get into it. This is a very, very interesting video. Stay tuned. So specifically, this email or this video will focus on the prophetic signs that occurred on July 14th. Because every day it's like a fire hose, and it's just barely enough, there's just barely enough time to keep up and document it, let alone make videos about it. I don't know when the videos will be made, because there is so much information that cannot, at this time, be communicated to the public. And that really, really bothers me. I did not sign up for this ministry. I did not sign up for this mission. I did not ask for it. And I do not want to be someone who knows these profound things that no one else knows. That's why it really bothers me. So anyway, on July 14th, Spain beat France 2-0 to advance to the World Cup final. And by the way, what I'm doing is I'm reading notes. I don't have time to make a fancy write-up. I'm just going to read the insights as they came, and therefore the insights will get more profound as they build on themselves. As the information builds and the insight gets deeper as to what is going on. But don't skip ahead, because you need to know what's going on. You need to know all of how it builds up to be able to understand and appreciate what the conclusion is. If it were just about the conclusion, I would just state it and turn the video off, and you could have a 2-minute video. But that's not how it works. In the 22nd minute, Spain, number 21, Mikel, scored on a penalty kick. Mikel was born on April 21st, 1997, which is 4 times 7 years before Pope Francis died. In the 58th minute, Spain, number 12, Pedro Porro scored. Pedro Porro was born on 9/13/1999. Pedro Porro was 322 months old the day before the game. Pedro Porro was 31 times 4 months, 31 times the fourth composite months, which is 162 months, before Pope Francis was elected on March 13, 313 in the year 13. Now, in God's big picture of signs, well, first of all, the way in which God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, is it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And so what I'm describing here is a pattern that has been well established, which is God using combinations of 1, 3, and 4. In this case, 31 times 4. And one reason being is Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4, which describes the defeat of the Antichrist at the end of the age, when the Messiah returns at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. So, also, this is the number of pi, God's mysterious number that he has baked, his mysterious transcendental number. That's technically what it's called, but it's a transcendental number, and it is 3.14, and that's another reason, but also this is God's creation number that he has baked into his creation, if you will, pi. But also in Exodus 3:14, God tells Moses his name, I am. The symbol for I am in Hebrew is the exact same symbol for pi in Greek, which is 3.14, as in Exodus 3:14. And that's proof of the God of the Bible. Anyway, we have here Pedro Porro being born exactly 31 times, an exact number of months, but it is the 3 times 4th composite number of months, 162, which, as I'll explain in a minute, is very relevant because God, through all of this, is pointing to Revelation chapter 16, verse 2, which is hinted at with 162 months. Okay, but also 4 times 13, another combination of the 3, 1, and 4, is equal to Pope, the word Pope, in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. The reason for 322 months between Porro's birth and the game, which was just one day before the game, is because of Genesis 3:22. This is another pattern that God has established, these 3 and 22 pattern, because of Genesis 3:22. Which is the verse that symbolizes what's going on in the end through the Antichrist. And this coming promise of immortality and reverse aging without God, which is why Pope Francis will be resurrected from the dead through demonic power. Now, the reason for being one day off the game is because God needed his birth date to also align with the date that Pope Francis was elected. For good reason, because that date connects to so many things. Okay? All right. Now, so we can get the idea here. Pedro Porro, okay? Now, he scored the second of the 2 goals. He's like the second witness, if you will. And even the 2 numbers of the 2 players that scored mirror each other, and so it's like a second witness also. Okay. Now, on this day, the same day, it was reported that Captain Sully Sullenberger has Alzheimer's. He is the captain, the pilot of the, American Airlines flight that crashed into the Hudson River after it was hit by geese. And he crashed right near Lower Manhattan, where 9/11 took place. It was a 9/11 sign. Of course, on 9/11, planes crashed into Lower Manhattan, which is where he crashed his plane, essentially. But there's lots more to that, but I'll just leave that for now. And I'm not even going to get to all of it in this video. I could talk for, it wouldn't, a 2-hour video would maybe be needed to do Sully Sullenberger justice in God's big picture of signs here. Now, on the same day, there was a story about 7,000 cases of parasite explosion and causing diarrhea. And on the same day, Fox Sports had to censor the star player for France after he was beaten, Kylian, for a comment, or during a comment he made, which he said, at the end of the day, you take all of the glory when you win. But when you don't win, you have to, take the shit. Okay, so diarrhea and the SHIT here. But I think this hints at the shot, which is the mark of the Antichrist, which is why the CDC is involved with all of this story here. And this mark of the Antichrist kills people, which is why Kylian, and as I'll explain and have explained in another video, the reason for France here is because of the French Revolution, the horrific, unlike anything, not like at all the American Revolution, the horrific French Revolution, which is actually a prophetic sign that's pointing to what is coming in America. America is going to have a horrific French Revolution led by the progressive utopianists, the crazies in America, the left. And what happened in the French Revolution? I highly recommend a video on YouTube. You can find it by just searching "The French Revolution was far worse than we realize." It's just a clickbait title, but it will tell you the horrors of the French Revolution, which was nothing like the American Revolution. The fact that they celebrated is amazing. By the way, as I'll get to, France was beaten on the day that symbolizes the French Revolution. It's their national holiday, which is the day that commemorates the beginning of the French Revolution. But I guess if you have a French Revolution and that's what your country is founded on, well, you're gonna, I guess you have to celebrate it, even though it's nothing to celebrate. So, but it's a coincidence here how we have the SHIT and the diarrhea, which tied them all together here. But this is also on the day that Sullenberger announced that he had Alzheimer's, or his family did, or something. And that involves the brain. And the mark of the Antichrist will affect, or has affected, people's brains. But what is coming through all of this is mass demonic possession, a zombie pandemic, a mass possession pandemic of demons possessing people through their brains that have these components that have been injected into them through the mark of the Antichrist. Now, so yes, here it is. The loss of France was on Bastille Day, this day that commemorates the French Revolution and symbolizes France, to their shame. July 14th, 2026 was the 10th anniversary, exactly, of the attack in France, the famous or infamous Nice truck attack. In 2016. I was there just after that. Just coincidentally. We say, okay, so this July 14th, 2026 is 87 days, or was 87 days, after Pope Francis died, and France soon said Francis, and vice versa. Pope Francis being the first of the two antichrists, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. In the Nice truck attack on July 14th, 2016, and by the way, the 10 years in Roman numerals, which is relevant to Francis, who resides or did reside in Rome, the number 10 is symbolized by an X. The Roman numeral X is 10 in Roman numerals. And an X in God's signs from the Bible symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist, the Tav mark, which would have been the mark used in Ezekiel chapter 9, for example. And the mark of the Antichrist is the inverse of the mark in Ezekiel chapter 9. And that just came to me, by the way. That's always happens when I go through the information in a video. Whenever you go through it, you're always seeing something new. Well, this confirms everything, this 10 years, because it's an X. Okay? And that's what I was saying, is that these other signs here are pointing to the mark of the Antichrist. Which, by the way, I'm jumping ahead, as described in Revelation 16:2, will give people painful sores. Painful sores will break out all over the bodies of people who have taken the mark. So, I'm jumping ahead though. We'll get to that in just a second. But again, the guy, Pedro Porro, scored this goal that connects with 162 months to the election of the Antichrist from his birth. Okay, that's huge. Because again, the mark of the Antichrist enforced by Pope Francis will give people painful sores. And so, that's where we're getting at here. Let me finish this though. Now, in the Nice truck attack, 87 people were killed, including the perpetrator. And okay, we'll have to hold on to that, because again, these insights just come as the notes aren't necessarily in complete order, right? They're just as it comes. So there'll be more insight on this in a second. Okay, so July 14th, 2016 was 227 years exactly after the storming of Bastille, which gives us Bastille Day. 227 is a number that's important in God's signs, for one reason being 22 divided by 7 is the closest fraction that approaches pi, 3.14. So this 227 number symbolizes pi. And 3 times 14, which is hinted at with pi, gives us 42, which in the Bible is symbolic of slaughter. Every example or instance of the number 42 is in context of slaughter in the Bible. And that's what we're talking about. Killian, the player who was bleeped out, who said this word on the day of the diarrhea story. All right. By the way, Fox News bleeped him out. I don't know if Fox is the sole network to have. It must be. It must be that it was Fox that was interviewing the guy. It wasn't just like someone else interviewing him, probably anyway. And then Fox edited it out. Fox would have been on the field interviewing the guy. And Fox hints at the mark because FOX gives us 666. F is the 6th letter, O is the 15th, and 1 plus 5 is 6. And X is the 24th letter, and 2 plus 4 is 6. And the number 666 is the number that's associated with the mark of the Antichrist and the Antichrist, who is Francis, and that's why Pope Francis, and that's why Francis Killian made the bleep, which relates to the mark, because this connects to this parasite and the CDC. And also the 10 years, which gives us the X to the truck attack. And the truck attack is confirmed to be relevant too because of the connection that I just described, getting us slaughter from Bastille Day, which was the beginning of the slaughter, which was the French Revolution, with massive slaughter. And that's what's coming in America, a genocide, a politicide by the left on their arch enemies, true conservatives and true Christians, as described in Bible prophecy. Now, Pedro Porro, okay, the guy that scored the second goal, his number jersey is 12, which is 4 plus 4 plus 4. Also, Pedro Porro gives us PP, and P is the 4 times 4th letter. So 4 times 4 and 4 times 4. And this hints at the 44th president, the second of the two antichrists, who will get his power from the resurrected Pope Francis, who will be the ambassador of the world, hence the World Cup. I mean, the ambassador of the world to the aliens, or the demons that pretending to be aliens, to fool people. Porro, the name meaning in Italian, which is relevant because Francis is in Rome, in Italy, means leak or wart. Okay, so Porro means wart. Pedro Porro, 1616, hints at Revelation 16 and the description of warts, painful sores. This is confirmed, as I explained earlier, from Pedro's birth to the election of Francis, and Pedro Porro scored against France. It is 162 months. But also you could argue that Pedro Porro, PP, 1616, is a hint at 16 to the power of 2. That would also hint at Revelation 16:2. Here's Revelation 16:2. So the first angel went out and poured out his bowl on the earth, and harmful and painful sores came upon the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. Okay, the mark of the beast. There's another prophecy describing a harlot riding the beast, and now I'm just jumping ahead, but in God's signs, Madonna is symbolic of the harlot riding the beast. She is, of course, a prostitute throughout her career, and she is famous for her love of horseback riding, and there have been also other prophetic signs involving her riding a bicycle. She's the woman riding the beast, which will be portrayed with Argentina, because in the prophecy, the harlot is symbolic of the Pope and the Vatican. The beast is the EU, the Antichrist system, the EU, which will be symbolized by Spain in this final. The image that will be worshipped is a metaphor that the author of Revelation, John, used to describe what he was seeing, which was computer language. Because if we get the translation of what is written when John says this, this image utters an unutterable language, which is computer code. So how would John describe smartphones with their screens and their visuals and the image and the unutterable language? It's an image. He doesn't know what it is. It's just an image. He wouldn't have had a clue what he was looking at. So that's the image. And the reason for this is because the image that will be worshipped is how the mark will be enforced. Through the internet, through smartphones. People will not be able to purchase or sell the rationed food if they have not taken the mark of the Antichrist. And digital programmable currency will make sure that this restriction is in place. Okay, so Bergoglio is Italian, right? Poro in Italian means wart. Pedro is Spanish or Italian for Peter, and Peter is the symbol or the bishop of Rome, is symbolic of the bishop of Rome, although Peter was never in Rome. And in Peter's writings in the Bible, he referred to Rome as Babylon, which was a metaphor in itself for pagan religion, because Rome was the home of pagan religion at the time. But when Rome converted in 313 AD, which is why Pope Francis was elected on the date 313 in the year 13, Rome did not do away with its pagan religion. It simply repackaged it and made it in a wrapper to look like Christianity. But it carried over all of the pagan religion, including the worship of the fertility goddess, which is now the quote-unquote veneration of Mary and praying to Mary, etc. Anyway, that's another subject. But again, make no mistake, I know far better than you. I know far, far, far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. To not appreciate this is to miss entirely the point of this prediction. It is not for you to go, cool. It is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. And these things aren't very controversial. It just depends on who you are. These are very straightforward things that a lot of other people know already. But if you have been a stubborn holdout on one of these controversial things, now you know. And there is no excuse after this, because I'm saying that this is the purpose of the prediction. I know why God has given me a voice through this prediction. And sorry, my conservative Catholic friends, it's not good enough. It's not good enough to say, well, this particular pope is a bad one, or there's a civil war going on within the Catholic Church. As the Bible says, come out of her, my people. God is referring to Catholicism. Come out of her, my people. Now, am I saying that God hates Catholics? Absolutely not. But if Catholics will be saved, it'll be in spite of their Catholicism, not because of it. But the reason why the Pope has all along, the reason why the Antichrist was all along going to be a Pope, and all popes in all of history have been lowercase a antichrists, because the office of the papacy is in itself blasphemy. The reason why the Antichrist is the Pope is for this purpose of compelling Catholics, especially, to finally make a choice, to come out of the whole thing altogether. Not just be like, oh, I'm a conservative Catholic, and we need to go back to some form of Catholicism that existed supposedly 100 or whatever years ago. No. As Bible prophecy says, this woman has been drinking from the golden cup of blood of the martyrs. It's and stop with the Catholic propaganda about, for example, there was at one time only the Catholic Church. No, all throughout the Catholic Church history, there's always been true Christians. And they were persecuted all throughout every century by Catholics. And it's all coming full circle. Rome will persecute true Christians at the very end, just like it did in the very beginning. In the Bestiary, in the Colosseum. It's like that at the end. That's why the Pope is the Antichrist. And was always going to be a Pope. And Old Testament prophecy is more than clear. But that's another subject. And I've talked about it in other videos. So let's move on. So Porro was born exactly 162 months before the election of Pope Francis, which, as I'm saying here, because Porro means wart, hints at Revelation 16:2, the painful, harmful sores. Amazing. Now, July 14th was exactly 5 years and 7 months after the first VACCINE was taken in the US, this symbolic date. This is part of God's pattern because the number 57 is equal to the word VACCINE. In simple English gematria, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Pedro Porro was born 23 months and 29 days before 9/11, which hints at Revelation 9/11, which is about the demonic possession of those who take the mark, which is the VACCINE. I should say those who have taken the mark, because it was the mark. The thing was past tense, the mark. The vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist. But nowhere in Bible prophecy does it say that one cannot repent. Anyway, 23 months and 29 days, it hints at this number 2329, which is the 666th semi-prime number, a number that is only divisible by two other prime numbers, which God uses. 23 months and 29 days is also 9 times 9 times 9 days. The number 9 is the most important number in God's big picture of signs, which is only being explained on this channel. As from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And so Pedro Porro was born not only 29 days, but also 9 times 9 times 9 days. Sorry, 23 months and 29 days before, and also 9 times 9 times 9 days before 9/11, which is at Revelation chapter 9, verse 11, which symbolizes this portion of Bible prophecy regarding the mark of the Antichrist and demonic possession. And this seems to communicate that those who take the mark will get the painful sores and warts. It's very clear, but I wrote this before it was really clear. Now, Sully, who was in the news on this same day, was 57 years old on the day of the crash, right near the location of 9/11, as in Revelation 9/11. And the mark, which is the VACCINE, which is equal to 57. So Sully Sullenberg was actually a mark of the Antichrist sign. Now, July 14th was 44 times 4 weeks exactly, which is also 40 months and 4 times 4 days, after French soccer legend Just Fontaine died at the age of 89 on February 28th. I'll be getting later to the significance of this 89 in a second, okay? But here we have the day of the French loss in the World Cup on Bastille Day, which is the coming French Revolution in America, but I would assume other places as well. Hence the World Cup. In other words, the whole world is going mad. The whole world is going mad. People on the left, the secularists, are going mad, and they will continue to increasingly get more mad to the point, ultimately, of demonic possession, which is when they will really, really, truly lose it and go mad. All right. And of course, all of this will be led by the 44th president, Mr. World, Barack Obama. He has this the guy who died at this number of period of time before the game, the French soccer player. And by the way, the King Louis the 4x4, presided over the French Revolution, or at least the beginning of it. That's also why we have the 4s here, connecting France's loss on Bastille Day, as in French Revolution, to the death of the soccer legend. Because of King Louis the 4x4. But King Louis the 4x4 ultimately also points to the 44th president, who will preside over a French Revolution, if you will, in America. Now, the guy, this French player, has the record, and God uses records for signs in general, for most goals in a single World Cup, with 13 goals in 6 matches. Okay? His full name is just Louis Fontaine. That confirms what I was just talking about. This connection here, hinting at King Louis the 4x4, which hints at the 44th president. So this hints at King Louis the 4x4 and the French Revolution. By the way, Michelle Obama will be the president and Barack Obama will be the vice president on January 20th, 29. And this is why Michelle Obama was on the French River at the time that the Notre Dame Cathedral burned. She was on a riverboat cruise, a chartered boat, promoting her autobiography, Becoming, because she will become the Queen of America. And of course, the royalty were beheaded, but also were the statues that the Notre Dame Cathedral is known for, the facade of kings. Statues of the kings from the Bible, the Jewish kings. And anyway, yeah, that's why she was present. Her boat had to be redirected, but there's a iconic shot of her drinking from a wine glass with a reflection in the glass of the burning cathedral. So she's drinking the burning cathedral. She is the Notre Dame, Our Lady, Queen. Paul McCartney composed the song Michelle, which he sang to Michelle in the White House when he was hanging out with hippies on the French River. Michelle Obama, one of the first things she did after they got into the White House was she committed a faux pas when she visited the Queen. She hugged the Queen of England because God was communicating that she will be the Queen of America. This is also why Princess Diana died at the French River in a car crash. Since at the plane crash in St. Louis, which is a city named after the King Louis IX, which since at King Louis the 4x4, the 44th president, was inaugurated in 2009, Kamala Harris is going to die in a plane crash along with Gavin Newsom in August of 2028, and these two running mates for president will be replaced in an emergency by the Democrats with Michelle and Barack Obama. That's why the crash of Princess Diana, which points to everything like I've just been talking about, the Queen of America, Michelle Obama. The July 14th signs, okay. So the signs on July 14th, the signs pointing to Pope Francis, including France, are the 850th composite days before Francis's predicted resurrection on May 2nd, 2029. Okay, 850 because of the 850 false prophets that the prophet Elijah battled on Mount Carmel. Very important in God's science here. I could explain lots more, but that's enough because it's all related to Antichrist, including the false prophets. So that's why also Pope Francis was elected exactly 85 years after the St. Francis Dam collapsed in Los Angeles, which hints at fallen angels. So that's why the 85 is relevant, okay? So the signs involving Francis, what confirms it's Francis is this 850th composite number of days connection to the predicted date, which was already known before this connection, of May 2nd, 2029 for the resurrection of Pope Francis. Now, Pedro Porro is the 10th semi-prime number of years old. Oh, and that's another X, because again, the Roman numeral for X is 10, and the letter X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. And Pedro Porro means Peter, as in the Antichrist Pope, warts, as a result of taking the mark, as in X, the 10th semi-prime number of years old. Amazing. Bastille Day was first made a national holiday in the year 1880. That's an amazing thing because God is frequently using this number 188 in his signs to hint at H188 in the Hebrew concordance for the Bible. Strong's concordance. I just realized though, he's 26 years old and 26 is 18 plus 8. Which also hints at 188. So Pedro Porro defeated France, as in Francis, on Bastille Day. He is 18 plus 8 years old, and Bastille Day was an official holiday in the year 1880. Well, by the way, the H188 word is the word woe exclamation mark, used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. These judgments in the book of Revelation. That includes the wart, or the warts, the painful sores. Perhaps through Spain defeating Belgium, which symbolizes the EU, because Belgium is the location of the EU Parliament in Brussels, which the architecture of which depicts a ziggurat, the type of building monument from ancient Babylon, the home of pagan religion, the Tower of Babel, in other words. Okay, so that's what Belgium symbolized, but Spain beat Belgium, and Spain beat France on Bastille Day, which symbolizes the French Revolution. So Spain, therefore, embodies the symbolism contained in Belgium and France when it goes on to play in the final against Argentina, which is symbolic of the harlot, because Francis is from Argentina. And as I mentioned earlier, the harlot is the Pope and the Vatican, which rides the beast, the EU. Furthermore, Argentina is a descendant of Spain. So Spain, in that way, symbolizes the beast, out of which, if you will, comes the harlot. I mean, the harlot's power, that's why it's a riding, right? The woman rides the beast. The harlot, the prostitute, rides the beast because the beast is giving her a ride. So Spain, if you will, gave Argentina a ride by birthing Argentina, right? And by the way, also, the symbol of the European Union is the goddess Europa riding the beast, the bull. That's literally the symbol. The symbol of the European Union is the goddess Europa riding the beast. Okay, so Spain birthed Argentina. This relates to the harlot who rides the beast because the harlot comes out of the beast, like Argentina came out of Spain in terms of power, etc. So, okay, one other thing here, though. The Spain versus France match was played in Dallas. And in God's signs, Dallas is symbolism for the American evangelical church. Even the mainstream media calls it the capital of evangelicalism. But God is using this to identify specifically what the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is, which is the evangelical doctrine. It is the doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. And where are the teachers of this doctrine taught? The teachers of this doctrine are taught in the seminaries in Dallas. And I'm referring to Reformed theology. And so you heard me criticize Catholics earlier. Well, evangelicals are deceived just in a different way. I'm talking about, for example, free grace, which comes in the package of dispensationalism, and sovereign grace, which comes in the package of Calvinism. Which, if you, according to them, don't intellectually believe the precise doctrine, you're not saved. Which is, of course, from Satan. But it has these people on the edge of their seat when they're listening to something like this, because this sort of talk threatens their salvation. As amazing as that sounds to someone who's not on the inside of that particular cult. And this includes things like predestination and our righteousness is as filthy rags, one verse that Luther took out of context and twisted to support his entire theology. And by the way, Luther wanted to remove some books from the Bible. He wanted to remove the book of Revelation and the book of James, for example, because they flatly contradict his theology. Luther was an Augustinian monk, and Calvin titled his writings Systematic Augustinianism and disparaged all the other church early fathers and only quoted Augustine, even though he came much later than them even. And when we talk about early church fathers, these are people that knew one of the apostles or knew someone who did and spoke the original Greek, unlike Augustine. Anyway, the Protestant Reformation was essentially a revivification of Augustinianism, of Augustine's writings, who corrupted the Western Church. His earlier writings were all right, but his latter writings corrupted the church. Augustine, in his latter writings, was influenced by his earlier years as a Manichaean auditor. For 9 years, Augustine was an official auditor in the Manichaean sect, the Gnostic sect of Manichaeanism, before he joined the Catholic Church. And that seeped through into his writings in his later years. And it corrupted the Western Church. And that's why we have the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day today. And so anyway, all of this is a fact when this prediction comes to pass. Make no mistake. God hates this doctrine. Okay? And it is the doctrine of the evangelical church, the majority of them. All right, now Spain birthed, and that's not to say that, I don't personally affiliate with our evangelicals. I'm just saying that there's a lot of error. It's like I said about Catholics. God doesn't hate Catholics, but there's a lot of error. And if an evangelical is saved, it'll be in spite of their errors and not because of it. The same with anyone. Spain birthed Argentina. Okay, I already read that. Okay, so we're getting onto a really interesting new subject here. Madonna portrayed Eva Perón. This all just came to me just like the other day. Even though it was known that Madonna would be doing the halftime show and that Argentina would win in the final for a long time, it only just occurred to me, well, wait a second, there's probably something here. Madonna portrayed Eva Perón in the movie Evita, the musical about Eva Perón. Okay? This date, 7/26, the date on which it is predicted Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, will be exactly 888 months after Eva Perón died on July 26, 1952. The movie Evita, starring Madonna as Eva Perón, premiered in Los Angeles exactly 24 years prior to the first VACCINE. December 14th, 1996, the movie Evita premiered. 8 plus 8 plus 8 years. That rhymes with the 888 months exactly between her death and this coming July 26th. Now, I'll explain more about what the reason for this rhyming here in a minute, okay? I'll explain this in a minute. Eva Perón, on her rainbow tour, her famous rainbow tour of Europe, which is the Beast, met with Francisco Franco, as in Pope Francis, the harlot, as in Eva of Argentina, as in Pope Francis of Argentina. In other words, Eva is the harlot here. She's the Madonna. She was played by Madonna. Pope Francis is the harlot in the harlot that rides the beast in Bible prophecy, the metaphor, the allegory here. We are, in other words, confirming the identity of this ancient scripture and metaphor used for our time regarding what's coming. Now, Eva was played by Madonna, the harlot. Eva was a sort of harlot. For example, according to the Evita movie plot, she prostituted herself with a series of men to climb the social ladder. Apparently, the story of Eva Perón is how she was from a very poor origin and used men along the way to climb the social ladder. Okay, so that makes her a prostitute. This is exactly how Kamala Harris got her start in politics. And that's not a conspiracy theory. Everyone knows this. Those that know things know this. That's how she became the district attorney of San Francisco under the mayor. What's his name? Brown. They had an arrangement. Okay? She came out of nowhere. And as you can tell, she doesn't have the intelligence to be where she's at. She got her start through being a harlot. Eva Perón, and God has confirmed this in his science. I'm not just saying this, right? Like I said, all of the controversial things I'm saying in this video will be proven to be true because they've already been proven to be true in God's true big picture of signs, which will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. That's how it works. And I know more than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. It is to prove these things. Eva Perón met with Spanish dictator Francisco Franco in Madrid on June 8th, 1947, at the start of her famous rainbow tour of Europe. And I just realized something. This is the reason for this way up here. the guy that scored the first goal of the game, he was born exactly 4 times 7, as in 47 years before Pope Francis. So we get, this is important as I'm explaining. I'm in the process of explaining it. You'll see. But that gives us the 47 here, as in 1947. And that confirms the significance of June 8th. This is huge. So anyway, we've got this game between Argentina and Spain upcoming, right? And here we have Eva Perón of Argentina and Francisco Franco of Spain. And they met on her rainbow tour of Europe. The rainbow is God's sign regarding judgment in the Bible, which is why the enemy uses it, if you know what I mean. On June 8th, at the start of her famous rainbow tour of Europe. Okay, now, this is just interesting. I'm sure it's relevant. And you know what? I know how it's relevant. I know. Now I know. Okay? And this is how it works. I always, get more insight as I go through the information in the video. Now, the movie Evita was released on this date, December 14th, 1996. It was exactly 24 years or 12 times 2 years, and 122 is equal to Pope Francis in simple English gematria. Also, San Francisco lies on the 122nd meridian line. And God uses the signs in San Francisco to point to Pope Francis. And, for example, Kamala Harris was born in the San Francisco Bay Area. Okay, so this number of 24 years is actually a Pope Francis number because it's 12 times 2. But it is also 8 plus 8 plus 8. But never mind that. It's 12 times 2, okay? It was exactly 12 times 2 years after the last American on the moon. The moon symbolizes Christ. It is a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock symbolizes Jesus. Also, the sun symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And watching for the timing of the moon in the Bible is important as it symbolizes watching for the timing of the Lord's return in prophetic signs, including moon signs. And the last American to depart the moon in Apollo 17 is symbolic of America's departure from Christ. Apollo 17 is the reason why the two space shuttle disasters were almost exactly 17 years apart. They are commemorated on the same date every year because of this. And it is also why the two towers were struck by two planes on 9/11, 17 minutes apart. It all points to Apollo 17 and the last American to depart the moon, which is symbolic of America's departure from Christ. This is why the 12 times 2, or 24, and well, actually, let's go there. This is huge because Jesus is equal to 888 in Greek gematria. The Greek name for Jesus is equal to 888 in Greek gematria. And the Bible is written in Greek. And so from the last departure from the moon, which symbolizes Christ, it is 8 plus 8 plus 8 years, which hints at Christ, to the release of the movie Evita. That's how important this is. That's how important this video is. Because this video, I'm sure, will be the only place talking about the release date of the movie Evita. But it's all related to the importance of this World Cup, in which the halftime show is Madonna, who starred in the movie Evita. I can't stress how important all this is, of course, right? From that date, we have another exact 8 plus 8 plus 8 years, which is also, again, 12 times 2 years, which hints at Pope Francis, to the first mark of the Antichrist on December 14th, 2020. Now it's clear why this is all relevant, because America's departure from Christ leads to the mark of the Antichrist. But that's what's being communicated here through the Pope Francis signs, because he's the Antichrist who will preside over the mark of the Antichrist. But again, we have all of these signs here, including what I described earlier on this date that France was defeated by Spain. And what we're getting at is a coming political revolution in America that will lead to genocide, which is a politicide. And much of it will involve persecution of those who refuse to take the VACCINE through, like I mentioned, restricting, for example, buying and selling of food that will be rationed in a food shortage. All right. And again, the player, this game was exactly 10 years after the Nice attack in France, and also the player that scored the Pedro Porro player is the 10th semi-prime number of years old, and 10 gives us X, which is symbolic of the mark, which makes all this relevant. Okay? Now, the thing is, too, here's some other things here. This release date for the movie Evita was exactly 4 times 4 years, as in the 44th president, to this date that the 44th president says was the worst day of his 44th presidency. So that's why the 4 times 4 years. Exactly. This was the day of the Sandy Hook school shooting. The last departure from the moon was exactly 144 weeks, which is extremely relevant from the book of Revelation in the Bible, after the first state legalized abortions, which was Barack Obama's home state, Hawaii. The 50th state, Barack Obama will be the 50th president. The irony of all ironies of all of history is that the Antichrist would have never been born had abortions been legal at the time that he was born. After his 18-year-old mother got knocked up by the leader of the communist movement in Hawaii. Okay, and so we have abortions connecting to this also. The abortions connected with exactly 144 weeks to the last departure of an American from the moon, which gets us to the SHOTs, the shots, the first one on this date here. But that's how the kids died, through shots. And what I am saying is that mass school shootings have been judgment from God. They've been judgment from God on the parents of the kids who condoned other parents murdering their unborn babies. And so their babies got murdered. Right? The parents of these kids, they may not have had an abortion themselves, but they aren't guilt-free. They aren't not guilty. They are guilty. They're part of the culture that has condoned this behavior and made it legal. And mass shootings in general have also been symbolic of the mass people taking the shots. The things that come out of guns and go into people are symbolic of the things that come out of things and go into people. And so Evita connects to this too. Now this date, that's 4 times 4 years after the release of Evita, which gives us Madonna and the harlot riding the beast, and the beast being associated with the mark of the beast, which is the shots. Now, it connects with 4 times 4 years to the worst day of the 44th president's presidency, but that day was also exactly 44,444 days after the first ever mass school shooting on April 9th, 1891. That's right. And again, the shootings are symbolic of the mark, which therefore identifies the Antichrist who will preside over the mark as the 44th president. That's how, there's no other explanation for 44,444 days between these two symbolic mass school shootings. And the 44th presidency, furthermore, there's 4 times 4 years. Obviously, like I said at the beginning, these reasons are clearly from God. Now, Eva Perón met with Francisco Franco on June 8th, 1947, 4,120 weeks, 28 weeks exactly, before the final, the World Cup final between Spain and Argentina, which will include the halftime show of Madonna, who portrayed Eva Perón. But what's the significance of 4,128? Well, 4,128 weeks is 4 times 4 times 258 weeks. The sum of the divisors of 258 equal 528. In other words, 258 hints at 528. In the sense that the date 528, that was the date of the final episode of the very famous popular TV show in the 1970s named Emergency. Anyway, this is part of a pattern, and so you'll have to take my word for it. I know it sounds a little strange and I didn't give enough information, but I don't need to, because the prediction proves what I'm saying. So that's why the 4,128 weeks. Francisco Franco was born on December 4th, 1892. The 680th composite number, a composite number is a non-prime number, the 680th composite number of months exactly before Barack Obama was born. And the name Barack Obama is equal to 68 in simple English gematria. That's why the 680th composite number of months connection. Francisco Franco, who not only points at Pope Francis, the first of the two antichrists, but also Barack Obama, who will get his power from Pope Francis. And Barack Obama will be a Francisco Franco, if you will, a dictator who will be responsible for the murder of thousands of political dissidents. Many thousands. It'll probably dwarf a number of, well, of course it would. Even the size of America dwarfs the size of Spain today, let alone the population that Spain had in the 1950s, or I should say 70s. No, I'm getting it mixed up with the dirty war in Argentina. Anyway, you get my point. Francisco Franco, the murderous dictator. Now, Spain, as in Francisco Franco, beat France on July 14th. Francisco Franco died on November 20th, 1975, and he was the dictator up until that date. And that date is the 44th semi-prime number of months before October 20th, 1964, when Kamala Harris was born in San Francisco. Okay, she's the harlot. She symbolizes Pope Francis, the harlot, riding the beast. Francisco Franco. Okay, now, that day that she was born is 741 months before the final between Spain, Francisco Franco, and Argentina, Eva, the harlot, Francis. in which the halftime show will be Madonna, who is the harlot riding the beast, which is why she loves riding horses. 741 months hints at the date 714, 714, the day of the game in which France was beaten by Spain. The day Francisco Franco died is exactly 608 months, which hints at Barack Obama, whose name is equal to 68, before the game on July 19th between Spain and Argentina, in which the halftime show is Madonna. But the game will end in Israel on 7/20, Israel time, making that an exact 608 months. And Argentina hints at Israel. The colors of both of these nations' flags are the same. And Messi hints at Messiah. Lionel, his first name, hints at lion. And the lion in Isaiah chapter 31:4 that defeats the Antichrist at the second coming of Jesus. Okay, now that's amazing. Now, Francisco Franco was born. So not only do we have from the death of Franco, we have the 68 number here with 608 months to the final involving Spain, which is where Franco was the dictator of. And the birth of Franco gives us another 68 to the birth of Barack Obama, as I explained. All right, the 680th composite number of months. All right, so, the 608 months, and furthermore, the 680th composite number of months, hints at Eva Perón's visit with Francisco Franco on the date 6/8, June 8th. Because again, this final match with Spain, as in Francisco Franco, and Argentina, as in Eva Perón, will be 608 months after he died. And again, it'll be Spain and Argentina, Eva Perón and Francisco Franco in the final. And they met on the date June 8th. That's why 608 months from the death of Francisco Franco to the Spain-Argentina game, as in Eva Perón and Francisco Franco meeting on the date 6/8. Okay, now, this is amazing, this paragraph here. Paul Simon is predicted to fall and injure his head on July 26th. That hints at G726 in the Strong's Greek Concordance, which is the word for rapture. And this date that Paul Simon is predicted to die will be exactly 888, which hints at Jesus, like I explained, months after Eva Perón died. Paul Simon lost $11 million on his musical Cape Man. Cape Man was his 9th solo album. That hints at 9/11, which makes this a sign. Paul Simon dabbled in Broadway musical for a little bit. He lost $11 million, famously or infamously. His Broadway musical infamously flopped. It's one of the biggest flops in Broadway musical history. But the musical infamously ran for only 68 shows. 68. You know what just came to me? Pope Francis will be, when he's resurrected, the 268th Pope. The 2 is a second Pope Francis, right? Actually, in this game, Spain beat France with 2 goals. I don't know. Anyway, Just a thought. But okay, so the musical Broadway, because Eva Peron and Madonna are about the Evita movie musical, right? Well, Paul Simon did a musical. So if Madonna is going to perform in the halftime show just 7 days before Paul Simon is predicted to fall, you would think there might be a connection because they are both associated with musicals. Famously, because Paul Simon's was infamous. And we already knew that it was a prophetic sign because it was his 9th album and it lost $11 million, the musical. Okay, so, but it ran for 68 shows. That's amazing because of these connections involving Eva Peron and the number 668. And Eva meeting with Francisco Franco on the date 6/8. Francisco Franco of Spain, as I just talked about. Okay. As in Evita, as in Argentina, as in the final between Argentina and Spain. All right. Now, Madonna portrayed Eva in the musical movie, and she will perform in the halftime show in the World Cup final with Argentina and Spain. Eva Peron of Argentina met with Francisco Franco of Spain on the date 6/8. Francisco Franco died exactly 608 months before the World Cup final with Argentina, Spain, and Madonna. Stunning. The final match will point to Psalm chapter 2, as I've explained in another video, which begins with "Why do the nations rage?" This World Cup. Long story short, this chapter is about the nations ganging up on Israel at the end, which is exactly what is happening and will continue to escalate until eventually the nations come against Israel and seek to destroy it, at which time the Jews finally call out for Jesus to save them, because Jesus said he wouldn't return until they called out for him by his name. And then these nations are destroyed. So anyway, this will point to chapter 2, as in, that could be the 2, by the way, in the 68 here, 268th Pope. That's actually more real. Psalm chapter 2 and the 68s here, as in 68 shows for Paul Simon. Because as I'm getting at, Paul Simon's recent album is 7 Psalms, and he'll die 7 days after this Psalm chapter 2 sign, which will be the World Cup final. As in 268th Pope, Pope Francis, as in Francisco Franco of Spain. The final match will point to Psalm chapter 2. Why do the nations rage? As in World Cup. And 7 days later, Simon is predicted to slip and fall. He has, by the way, a hit song, Slip, Slide, and Away. And Simon's recent album is 7 Psalms, hence the 7 days connection to the Psalm chapter 2 sign, the World Cup final. Paul Simon is the 7 Psalms sign. He's going to fall, which will lead to his death, but not right away. 7 days later, which is why the album 7 Psalms. And Paul Simon is predicted to die when he is 86. Currently, he is 84. He'll die from his brain injury, but that won't be until he's 86. And the age of 86 is hinted at with his musical's 68 shows. By the way, Paul Simon received a prophetic dream in 2019 that instructed him to make the album 7 Psalms, and even told him that that's the name of the album that he is to be working on. And in all of his interviews, he recounts this story. He even has the piece of paper that he wrote on after the dream framed and hanging on the wall. So the 7 Psalms album is from God. And that's why the 7 days connection here, from the World Cup to the predicted fall of Paul Simon, which will begin The Sound of Silence. Paul Simon's first big hit that launched his career, Sound of Silence. His fall and his vegetative state and coma will be symbolic of a sound of silence. Revelation 8:1. There was a period of silence heard in heaven. The sound of silence in heaven is in Revelation chapter 8. At the beginning, it precedes the judgment. Which then follows with the 7 trumpets of judgments, as in 7 Psalms, including the 5th of the 7 trumpets, which describes the coming demonic possession through people's brains, which is why Paul Simon will hit his head and injure his head. The demonic possession will be facilitated by delta frequencies, 5G frequencies. 5G hints at 57, 57, 5G, 7th letter of the alphabet. 57, as I explained, hints at the word VACCINE, which will cause the components of which to go into the brain and be transistors for the frequencies that will induce delta brain waves, 5th of the 7 trumpets, which will engender demonic possession. That's why, for example, the first line of Paul Simon's famous song from his 7th and best-selling album, Graceland, begins with, "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar." Mississippi is the 9 plus 11th state, as in Revelation 9:11, that symbolizes this demonic possession through delta frequencies. Also, Simon sang American Tune on the date 119, which hints at Revelation 9:11 at Jimmy Carter's inaugural ball. And he sang about Apollo 11 9 days before the release of Stephen King's book, The Shining, which is about demonic possession. Revelation 9:11 describes King Apollyon. The demonic possession will be caused by taking the mark, which alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes, which is why Stephen King resides in the 23rd state, famously resides in the 23rd state. All right, so that's a little bit. Now, to finish this, Francisco Franco was known for rescuing Jews during World War II. There will be a mass exodus of Jews from America because of the Antichrist and Barack Obama and the persecution from the left that has gone mad, but is going to get even much madder, insaner. Spain's win gives them their first World Cup appearance in 4 times 4 years, which is the 44th president. The Francisco Franco, dictator of America, coming. This is in addition to Franco's birth being 680th composite months before the birth of the 44th president. Barack Obama, again, equals 68. Hints at Obama returning as the dictator of America. The win against France, as in Francisco Franco, by Spain, was on Bastille Day, as in French Revolution, which is the anniversary of the invasion of the Bastille prison. Oh, by the way, the prison is symbolic of the Revelation 9:11, because the demons that coming to demonically possess people rise out of the pit, the jail, the prison of the pit that's unlocked with the key. The word key is equal to 41, which is in gematria, which is why Simon was born in 41, and on and on. And he composes music with musical keys. So anyway, so again, the win with France by Spain, as in Francisco Franco, on Bastille Day, as in French Revolution, was on the anniversary of the truck attack in Nice, as in Nicolaitan, as in France, as in Francisco Franco. Bastille Day was first official in 1880, which hints at whoa exclamation mark, as I explained. The game was in Dallas, which hints at Nicolaitan. So this is a second witness, the connection between the Dallas game and the attack in Nice, right? Nicolaitan. This communicates that the dictator Obama with Pope Francis will murder Nicolaitan Christians, as described in Bible prophecy. 87 people were murdered in Nice, France. The game against France, as in Pope Francis, was the 87th prime number of days after Pope Francis died. On Francis's 87th birthday, lightning struck the statue of St. Peter in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where Francis is from, and knocked the keys out of his hand. The Vatican's symbol is keys, and in Bible prophecy, a key unlocks the door to the bottomless pit, from which the demons will rise and then resurrect Pope Francis. That's the reason for the connections here of 87, because of the 87th birthday and the prophetic sign that pointed to Pope Francis. And keys. I mean, literally, it's amazing. The lightning struck the hand of the statue of Peter, which symbolizes Rome, right? And the keys were knocked out. Like the hand was holding keys. But that part of the statue was blown away. Okay, and we already did this one. The Nice truck attack, 227 years after storming of Bastille, which gives us slaughter, as I explained earlier. So in other words, there's a coming slaughter by the Antichrists around the world, as in World Cup, and America, as in the President of America, Barack Obama. Madonna performed on the beach in Rio de Janeiro to a record-setting audience size on May 4th, 2024. The 666th composite number of days, which is 806 days, before her World Cup halftime show on July 19th, 2026. Okay, and as we've been talking about in this video, this World Cup will be a massive Antichrist sign. The coming Mary apparition, which is also a prediction, the coming Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, predicted to occur on March 22nd, 2029, will be news for the world, as in World Cup, and will deceive the masses of the world, as in the masses attending the World Cup games and her attendance and her concert. The concert in Rio celebrated Madonna's 40th year of her career, and the record-setting attendance was 4 times 0.4 million people, which hints at the 44th president, Antichrist. And again, given the 666 connection here from the 40th year career concert in which 4 times 0.4 million attended, identifies the 44th president as the Antichrist, 666. And if you are a Catholic, what I mean here is that the coming Mary apparition, which will be a massive one, and the whole world will see it, is in fact a demon pretending to be Mary, as have been all Mary apparitions in all of history. All of them have been demons pretending to be Mary. These Mary apparitions easily deceive Catholics because Catholics are easily deceived. 99 or whatever percent of the Catholics don't know the Bible, and they don't understand the gospel. They don't understand Christianity. Catholicism is a man-made religion on top of the Bible, which includes these superstitions like Mary and Mary apparitions. Anyway, anyone that's familiar with the New Testament and the Bible can clearly see that the quotations of these supposed Mary apparitions have been in stark contrast with the truth of the gospel. In fact, they're clearly from a demon trying to deceive people that don't know any better. Catholics, easy prey. And there is a principle in the Bible where people get the deception they ask for. So that's why Catholics are constantly having supernatural experiences. I mean, this is a big part of what it means to be a Catholic. Supernatural experiences. This, for them, is what confirms for them their faith. They fail to take into account that demons would do exactly what they're expecting them to do, to fool them. I'll give you a little anecdote. I met a woman who you could say we became friends, but it was only a brief time that I knew her. But she was friendly. We were friendly with each other, and I had no reason to believe that she was lying. And furthermore, from what she told me, I believed that this would actually happen. So her and her friends were in a cathedral, and they witnessed together the wafer piece of bread that Catholics take for their salvation levitate off the table. All right, and I have no reason to not believe her. I believe this actually happened. The piece of bread levitated off the table right in front of them. There are only two explanations for how this could have occurred. One, it was an angel that levitated the piece of bread off the table in order to encourage them to take more pieces of bread for their salvation. Two, it was a demon who levitated the piece of bread off the table in order to encourage them to take more pieces of bread for their salvation. And in the Bible, taking pieces of bread for one's salvation is not in it. It's a man-made thing made up by the Catholic Church. And how did this practice evolve over time? Or why? Well, it was to bring in the masses of people into the church to get their money. One last thing before we end this video here, I forgot to mention, but it has been explained, and I won't explain it in this video anyway, but it has been explained in other videos, that God is using the historic Maradona soccer player for Argentina as part of this pattern and story regarding Madonna and her halftime show for this year's World Cup. In fact, when it was recognized earlier on in the World Cup that God was pointing back to the Maradona game in 1986 in the World Cup, that it was obvious that Argentina would be playing in the World Cup, given that Madonna, which rhymes with Maradona, would be doing the halftime show. Anyway, long story short, in 1986, Maradona was involved in the arguably two most famous goals. Oh, speaking of two goals. Maradona was involved in arguably the two most famous goals in all of World Cup history that occurred 4 minutes apart in the same game. The first one being nicknamed the Hand of God goal, and the second one nicknamed the goal of the century. These two goals were against England, and incidentally, Argentina just beat England by scoring 2 goals. So anyway, the hand of God goal was an illegal goal that was deception. It was a subtle deception. Maradona moved his head like he was headbutting it, but he actually tipped the ball in with his hand, and the referees didn't recognize it. And then the second goal, the goal of the century, is an astounding play in which he dribbled past 5 defenders to score the goal. And that hints at the 5th Pope of the century, Pope Francis. The 5 players that were beaten, that's why the goal is famous. He beat 5 players, and the goal is nicknamed the goal of the century, and this hints at the 5th Pope of the century, Pope Francis. Right? When he will be resurrected, he will become the 5th Pope of the century. We have Pope John Paul II, then Benedict, the 4 times 4th, and then Francis, and then Leo, and Francis again for the 5th Pope of the century. As in 5 players beaten in the goal of the century by Maradona, which is why Argentina will win the World Cup, in which is playing Madonna, the 666th composite number of days after her concert on the beach in Rio, which symbolizes, or which is a sign that points to the day in which the world, the masses, will be deceived by this demon that will pretend to be Mary on March 22nd, 2029. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or 2 that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of Most quote-unquote Christians instead follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, Please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.